Welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us for the Q2 product release and roadmap webinar. As a reminder, we host this 30-minute webinar the last month of every quarter to share what we recently released, how to make the most of those releases, and then share what is coming in the next quarter. So we are recording this webinar and we'll share the recording along with all the slides after the session is over. But during this webinar, please feel free. There's a Q&A box on your screen so you can ask questions as we go. And we have reserved time at the end of the session to answer those questions. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. We have Bill Schneider. He's our VP of Product Marketing. Greg Wagner, he's our VP of Product. And Rory Everett, he's our Senior Product Manager. On the agenda, we're going to just be talking about how, our response to the COVID crisis, so what that looked like in Q2, looking ahead to Q3, and then we'll touch on some helpful resources and upcoming opportunities that are available to you. And again, we have reserved room at the end for Q&A. So with that, I want to pass it over to Bill to take it away.
Cool, thanks. Thanks, Colette. And hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. So Q2 is certainly going to be a quarter to remember. Let's take a look at some of the things that we have updated and worked on in Q2. Like many of you, we made some really important shifts over the last 90 days to help us better adjust to the new economic environment that we find ourselves in and the health environment that we find ourselves in. And there were a number of very important projects that we had been working on that had moved to the forefront. The first was we added additional support to medical verification. There was an amazing amount of support that we saw from customers like you to support health workers in the US and also in multiple countries around the world. And so we made some important updates there that I'm going to walk you through in just a few moments. We also made some significant enhancements in fraud prevention. Fraudulent activity was up significantly in many sectors of our economy, and we saw some of those effects on our platform as well. And so we took this opportunity to make enhancements to our platform and harden our system even further. And we also made improvements in document review in many places around the world as brands are adding new programs to different places. And we're going to walk through some of those enhancements. I'll talk about improvements to health worker verification and then turn it over to Rory to handle the next two topics on fraud prevention and document review. So let me start off and talk a little bit about some research that we did. Now, if you didn't notice, we conducted some research in early to mid-March that we released in early April. And this was featured on our blog and some of our other materials. And I wanted to summarize some of that for you here today, as we were really trying to understand, what was the latest consumer attitudes and behaviors towards personalized offers, and what were consumers really looking for from brands in particular in the new environment that everybody found themselves in. And it was really striking to see how quickly things had shifted. Consumers across the board, from college students to seniors, felt a dramatic shift in terms of how they felt in their day-to-day life. They felt anxious, they felt overwhelmed, and they were really looking for solutions. They were looking for solutions from all of their institutions, obviously, and brands were one of those sources that they were looking to solutions towards. What was interesting was that in addition to looking for benefit for themselves, they were also really interested in providing support to health workers in particular. And this was across the board. And what was interesting to see there is consumers were more interested in helping health workers and medical workers than they were themselves, which was a really great thing to see, just on a personal level. And they believe brands performed an important role there. And they saw in particular that personalized offers were an effective method that brands could provide some support to positively impact their day-to-day, which would positively impact their relationship with the brand. So, that was a very important data point for us as we were getting a lot of information on the new environment to kind of harden our resolve on what we were planning to do and how we wanted to respond. So next slide. So that accelerated our approach to adding to our current coverage for health workers. And as you may know, we had already built 100% coverage for U.S. nurses and doctors, as well as first responders. But as we also know, that this wasn't a situation that was limited to the U.S. And so we looked to what we could do quickly to help support the customers that were adding new programs in different parts of the world. So we added support to Canada, to the UK, France, and Germany, which now allows us to provide coverage for 25 million health workers to date, with, as I mentioned, 100% coverage. And here's how it breaks down. So let me highlight kind of the new aspects here. So in the US, we added 11 million additional health workers to the coverage that we already had. And these allow us to cover other important frontline medical roles like pharmacists, respiratory therapists, lab techs, mental health counselors, and over 100 other positions. We also added 100% coverage for Canada, which covers 850,000 national service workers, which includes nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers. In the UK, we now provide full coverage of their national service workers group, which includes doctors and nurses, as well as social workers and social care workers and many other roles. In Germany, we now provide full coverage for doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers, covering 5.5 million medical workers. And the same is true in France, where we now cover 1.9 million healthcare workers in their healthcare system. And this is helping us provide and support the unprecedented demand that we've seen for healthcare programs in general. To give you just a point of comparison, we saw a million customers, a million healthcare workers served through the brands that we support in the month of April. This was a 40x increase over last year. So that gives you a sense for the volume and the outpouring of support that we saw, and also the opportunity that is out there in front of us as the medical community is looking for support, in need of support, and really grateful for some of the support that brands are providing. So with that, I will turn it over to Rory, and we will talk about fraud prevention. So Rory, over to you.
Thanks, Bill. So I work on our product and development teams here at ShareID. And this quarter, we spent a lot of efforts around fraud and around doc review, which are two topics that don't usually come up in our client conversations. They're kind of in the realm of our business where it should just work. So we've been spending a lot of effort to make sure it continues to just work, even with these kind of unprecedented challenges we've had before us. As Bill mentioned, during COVID, a lot of sectors in our economy saw an increase in fraud, and whether that's through desperation or more people at home kind of starting to get into a little bit of a hacking kind of work. It was interesting that we had a big uptick starting in March and really carrying through into April and May. This forced us to up our game in ways that have really benefited us and all the programs that are working with us. The actual activity we had spotted was really concentrated in just a handful of programs, and we had partnered closely with those programs in order to be able to build up our defenses. All of the defenses start with good monitoring. So we need to be aware of the fraud and be able to analyze what's going on in order to be able to come up with effective defenses for it. And so we've invested in getting real-time data without any lag behind it. We've invested in gathering as many data points as possible that we can look for patterns in, and all still in a very consent-driven way. And we've also been able to implement daily monitoring and alerting. So we actually have a fraud analyst who is watching this, in real time now. Once we've, can we move to the next slide, please? So once we've identified patterns, we then need to stop those patterns from repeating. And so there are multiple ways in which we will block this fraud. And a lot of the focus here is on mass fraud, where typically the incentive is a person or a group of bad actors is trying to monetize the offer. So we saw this manifest in many different ways. Some of this, which we've done for a while, is around just abusing same person info. Someone comes back and tries to get the offer repeatedly using this, the same credentials. And that's what we refer to as same person limits. And you're probably already familiar with us, and like we can dial in how you want those same person limits defined. But we've also added additional fraud backstops around looking at IP address, looking at the device hash, which we're able to collect based upon their browser information, and a new vendor integration around fraud, where we're really looking for as many signals as possible about, is this legitimate, is it suspicious, or is this obvious fraud? Lastly, just to mention here, these high frequency attacks, we actually did see some very sophisticated actors trying to overwhelm our systems as a way to get around them. We had as high as 10,000 verification requests within a handful of minutes. And so we have a new web application firewall that helps protect us from those types of attacks, as well as rate limiting policies to stop any one program from like running away in a way that is outside of statistically normal expectations. We can do the next slide. So while we block the obvious fraud, as a company, there's always a spectrum between trying to keep low friction for legitimate consumers while having enough friction to keep out the bad guys. And so when we are truly blocking someone and saying you cannot proceed, we have a fairly high bar for that because we're sensitive to blocking legitimate consumers. So there still can be a gray area where some abuse will happen. We now have this new capability that's just come online to progressively add friction when something is suspicious. So it's not that obvious blocking category, but something is suspicious. Typically, this will involve, we need to gather some more information from the consumer that we can then use as additional data, to run through our pattern detection, as well as its further assurance that this person is who they say they are. So it's information that relates to their status and is ideally, we can tie to them as an individual and something only known to the individual. So the two ways in which we're doing this now is through an invocable SMS loop, where you have to have a phone number and prove ownership of that number with a one-time code, or through Docker review and saying that actually this is suspicious enough, we really need to make sure that you're going to submit proof to us and that we're not going to approve it instantly through some of our other sources. And if you can go to the next slide, we have an example with the SMS loop of what that can look like. Oh, sorry, I think we had a double slide in there. You can go on to the next one. So this is what that looks like, where when SMS loop is enabled on a program, we will collect the phone number as part of the main form. We then run it through a set of rules, and these rules are constantly getting updated in real time based upon the latest attack vectors that we've seen. If it's passes, is clean, then it just simply moves on, and in many cases, that individual will get instantly approved. However, if it's suspicious, that's when we trigger an SMS message to their phone with a one-time code, and we require that that code is entered in order to be able to continue. We've been working with a couple of brands who have already implemented this, and we feel like we've been able to hit that right balance between the right amount of friction and stop fraud, and while keeping it an easy process for everyone else. And that we haven't seen drop off in conversions as a result of this. So those that are legitimate and going through SMS are motivated to continue that step. I think next slide, I think that concludes that section. And then the last topic, just to touch on briefly, is around Docker review. So another COVID-related activity that was new to ShareID is we had some programs that went viral. Some of the brands working with us decided that they wanted to offer a really deep discount to medical and in many cases first responders. So anyone working in hospitals or with a nursing certificate or even like police and EMT. And they wanted to do this in such a deep discount in a way that actually like they would bring in a lot of verifications in a very short amount of time. This ended up having a downstream effect on with our doc review. We suddenly saw our doc review queues shoot up. And in a way that we had to be frankly scrambling for a little while in order to try to process those with the same high quality that you always expect from us, but keeping it with fast turnaround. To get better ahead of that situation, we then further invested in doc review in order to bring down that average, and just we're always constantly working to get better and better, and to make sure that we are less susceptible to these kinds of spikes in the future, and that we won't get swamped. So it's been a great learning opportunity there. At this point, we're very happy to announce that we actually our average over months for English has been under 3 minutes. We also do that 24/7, so nights and weekends, and for many other languages besides English. And I think that this has been a way that we can continue to help give great service to the consumers who want to get verified for your brand's deals, especially the 24/7. We actually ran an analysis and saw that 37% of our doc reviews come in on nights and weekends, so kind of outside of standard US business hours. So the fact that it was 24/7 with such fast turnaround and a good contractual agreement about our max wait time really helps set us apart. And we've lowered our contractual agreement for max wait time for these other languages, with French through Spanish being our most popular ones currently. And then everything else, we still have great coverage there as well. I think there are 32 languages we currently support, although we're always happy to add more to that roster based upon interest from our brands. So I think that next slide, please. And we'll transition to Greg.
All right, thanks, Rory. This is Greg. I'm also from the product team. Before we cover the roadmap, I wanted to touch on the recent events I know a lot of us are thinking about these days. At ShareID, we've been reflecting on what we can do as a company and as employees and citizens to support the recent protests in Black Lives Matter. The company has encouraged us to take extra time to reflect and volunteer. They've fostered internal dialogue and also promoted our employee-driven diversity and inclusion group. They've also brought in company-wide diversity training, where in fact we're having our first session this afternoon. Some of these activities have been organic, and to share one example, several of our engineers volunteered their time and they updated naming conventions in our source code. So and this is something I'm sure our customers are never going to see, but these are terms of art that have been around the computer science field for decades. Some examples are like whitelisting or blacklisting, things that have hurtful connotations and really has no place in an inclusive environment. But this is something this group got together, and I think it reflects the spirit of ShareID. I know that, beyond this, a lot of us are here because supporting underappreciated community members goes back to the core of ShareID's mission. Examples are supporting teacher programs for teachers, first responders, frontline healthcare workers, owners of nonprofit businesses. And it's something that all of us take to heart. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about our plans for Q3. We plan to expand our offerings in Canada. We began that in this quarter. We have some new segments we're going to add. We're also greatly expanding our international student coverage. And we're also, Rory's going to share one other innovative way we're improving our verification process by offering chatbot-based support. Next slide, please. So these are the new segments in Canada. Bill had already touched on medical. There's some more detail on the segments of the medical community in Canada. It's about 850,000 medical professionals split between doctors, nurses, and a variety of other medical professionals. To that, we're adding the first responder category. I know a lot of our customers have given us feedback that They wanted first responders included in some of these medical heroes offers, because a lot of times these firefighters, paramedics are in the front line helping out. So there's another 250,000 individuals we can address in Canada there. And then also adding to that military verification, another 70,000 individuals there. Next slide. International student coverage. So ShareID, as you know, and many of you already know, supports international student programs in 193 plus countries. But the availability of instant data really varies depending on the country's infrastructure. So if some countries have more instant data, more instant coverage available than others. And if we don't have it, if it's in the event someone isn't covered, we back that up with document review. Of course, our review times have improved, as Rory mentioned, but instant coverage is always better. And so we have some good news on that front. In these countries that we have listed here, we're greatly expanding the instant coverage that we'll make available. So we have a new technique that we're applying to increase single sign-on coverage. And we expect instant coverage rates to improve between 25 and 50% in the country, depending on the geography. So we'll have more details when these on the exact instant coverage rates when they come live, but we're really excited about this development. For the last slide, I'll hand back to Rory.
All right, so as Greg mentioned, we have been thinking about the consumer experience from many different angles. One of which is we want to really try to help consumers when they need the help without them needing to reach out to support via help tickets and then have a back and forth over email. So we are starting with this FAQ of, instead of presenting a separate page with a big wall of text, I'd like to break that apart and serve it up in a chatbot format. So we think that our hypothesis is that this will really help with being a contextualized help. It's more concise and kind of can be, you can quickly drill into like the specific question that they have. And then if they do need personalized support to reach out to our support team, that team already then has a lot more context about kind of where this individual is at and the types of problems that they're having. And so there'll be fewer back and forth in order to actually get to resolution. So we are starting a pilot of this with a couple of brands. If that's successful, we'll be looking at kind of rolling this out across a broader set of our FAQs. All right, that's it from me.
All right, great. I had, back to me. This is Bill. Hi, everybody. There were a couple other announcements that I just wanted to make. The first is we have a PR opportunity that you could take advantage of if you have a back to school offer for teachers or students. We are going to be issuing a press release highlighting all of the offers for teachers and students during the back to school time period. The press release will go out on July 22nd. And this is, a great opportunity to get some additional exposure for your offer. We typically get really good national media exposure with a lot of the metro dailies around the country, as well as national publications like USA Today and CNN. So if you're interested, just send a note to the email handle that's on the screen. And all that we're looking for there is a 25-word description. There's an example there. And we will be sending out this information in a follow-up email, so you don't have to worry about scribbling it all down right now. So please take that into consideration, and we'd love to promote your offer in that release. The second announcement that I wanted to talk about is a new community that we started that's on Slack. It's called ShareID Allies, and it's an opportunity for you to plug in and learn everything about ShareID, and more importantly, how to run and build high-performing identity marketing programs for all of the consumer tribes that we help you connect with. This is a great opportunity to get to know other peers and professionals in this area, share best practices, talk about tips and tricks that are working for you, ask different folks in the ShareID community about specific questions you may have, and get new kinds of information about new updates and materials that we have, new research that we're doing in ShareID. So we will also be sending out this information in the follow-up email for you to join. So please do. We'd love to see you there and to continue the conversation. So that is it for the material we had planned today for our Q2 product webinar. Colette, I'll hand it over to you, and now we can take any questions.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we have a couple that came in during the last 30 minutes. So the first one, Bill, actually is probably more directed towards you, and it's, are there any charges to any of the new fraud enhancements that Rory spoke to?
Yeah, no, that is all of those capabilities are part of our platform. You know, that is a commitment we have to you, is to really help mitigate fraud while optimizing conversion. And so as a customer of ShareID and a subscriber of our platform, you get the benefit of all of that new technology that we've and processes that we've put into the platform for you. So that's some good news.
Great. And then just one more, and either Bill or Rory, you can probably comment on, are the new countries that have been added to the healthcare segment going to be verified by doc review, or will they be instant?
Yeah, I can start here, and Rory and Greg, if you have any other points to add, please do. They are the new countries that we've listed. Those are a doc review. That is one of the reasons why we've made some of the enhancements that we've had also on doc review, is to really improve performance there and provide a great experience for consumers. And you know, that allows us to provide the coverage rates that we have within each of those countries, so that consumers, you know, medical workers that are in those countries can be sure that they can be verified if they are if they have the appropriate credentials.
Great. Well, I think that was it on the question front. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today.
One more, Colette.
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Rory.
Someone asked, do you have a document brochure on this? And I think that was about our instant coverage for international students.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that was referring to the SSO coverage, I imagine, the updates. So as we're rolling that capability out, we will have material that describes that in more detail. If you have specific questions today, you can reach your account manager, your customer success manager, and they can connect you with somebody on the product team to handle any questions directly.
Great. Thank you, Rory, for seeing that. And thank you, Bill, for answering that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will send out these slides and the recording, so feel free to share them with your team members who may not have been able to join. And again, this session is in the last quarter or last month of every quarter. So be on the lookout for our next webinar in Q3. With that, have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.